Welcome to our API Exploration for Testers, a persona series. So we are conducting a couple of these to make sure that we cover a couple of different personas and where we could add value with Explore. So before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, my name is Timio Sanchez. I'm the product manager, or one of the product managers here for the API lifecycle. And Alex, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Tamil. Hey there, folks. I'm Alex Bonstrom. I'm a solutions engineer here on the API side. I help sell our tools, SwaggerHub and PactFlow, and I'm real pleased and excited to be a part of showing off Explore today, one of our new tools.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that. Again, a couple more housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand for viewing. You should receive an email after this call. If anybody has questions, you could post them either on the chat or box or the Q&A box. Definitely up to you. And then we'll leave some time towards the end for some Q&A and talk a little bit about what you guys thought of the session, if there's any other gaps. And if we don't get through all the questions, we will follow up. So for today's agenda, we're going to cover what is API exploration, API tester challenges that exploration can help address, improving API development outcomes with SwaggerHub Explore, which is a product that we will be demoing today. We'll quickly jump onto the demo after that. We'll talk a little bit about the roadmap towards the end, and again, we'll leave some time for Q&A. So before we get started, also, I want to run a quick poll, so please, thank you very much. So just very quickly before we get started, if you guys, where do you see the most friction in your API development journey? Thank you very much for answering those. Okay, so what is API exploration, right? Basically, API exploration solves a lot of problems, but starting with understanding how the API works to determine if it really solves a problem. So a lot of times when we're consuming APIs, when we're building applications or software, the first things we do is, has this issue already been solved somewhere else? And a lot of times we turn to APIs. And some of the bigger challenges with APIs as a consumer is to really understand how it works. Will it fit the need that I'm looking for? Or is it, more of a problem to implement this API, right? And you want to be able to make those decisions really quickly. So that's where exploration can help. Or one of the ways exploration can help is interacting with the APIs via a client tool that helps you very easily input parameters, validate the responses, and really understand what type of inputs will give you outputs, what type of data does it accept, what type of metadata does it accept, is it secure, right? These are all things you want to answer really quickly to really make sure that the API will fit into your application. Also, when we go into the API documentation to try to understand the API, let's talk about this from a QA perspective, right? So when you're building tests, you do need to be familiar with that API, and sometimes that's a very big challenge. And API exploration can definitely help in this case. Again, very similar to the previous comments about interacting with APIs. You need a client that will really allow you to go a step further in documentation. For example, in documentation, you might get an example of a JSON payload, right? But you want to test different data types. You want to validate negative tests, or something accepts only integers. What happens if you send a string? Will the API respond correctly? And you could start formulating thoughts of how you will build your tests on these. So again, API exploration can really help in that sense of forming your concepts of what tests should look like before even moving on and building out those tests. It quickly confirms assumptions and expectations, right? Again, you don't want to go too deep in code or too deep into a test or building a framework around validating these APIs before you validate what your expectations from these APIs are, or the requirements from these APIs. It can also, surface undocumented behavior, right? Again, a very big part of testing is not only validating whether APIs work as they should, but that they also, respond negatively to inputs that are not expected. A lot of security issues arise like this. That's why we do fuzzing scans and things like this, and you could really take a look at that really early on as part of your exploration of the APIs, instead of trying to validate that further in the life cycle. And then also gives access to developer experience offered by given the API. So again, when we're building APIs, we do need to build them with developer experience in mind. And this is not only a job of the developer, right? As a tester, you should also ask yourself, does this API solve a problem? Yes, it does. Does it solve it in a way that is easy for the developer to consume, right? If it doesn't, then comments and more conversation should arise around these items. So API exploration for testers in the API lifecycle, right? First thing is, what is a SwaggerHub Explorer? SwaggerHub Explorer is a very simple to use API client that allows you to interact with both REST and Kafka APIs, more to come in the future, in a very similar manner so that there's very little learning curve. This API Explorer or SwaggerHub Explorer has been out since February. It's a brand new tool, and there's a lot of opportunity for the newcomers to definitely provide input about where we're going and what the needs are as part of your API exploration process. Definitely keep that in mind. And we have been taking a huge uptake in the market. We have just under 14,000 users, and it's growing really rapidly. So definitely take a look at it, and we'll again present the demo towards the end. So a little bit about our, or some information from our state of the API quality survey that we run every year. And one thing that I thought was really, really important is, how do we measure success in terms of APIs, and how do folks see that? And as you can see, the top three are like performance, usability, and developer experience, as we already talked about, and availability of that actual API. And if we think about things from an exploration perspective, we can help make sure that our APIs meet the criteria to measure, success, right? So for example, when we're running performance tests on the APIs to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our customers on the APIs, you can, when there are issues and when there are latency problems, you can really dissect the API workflows via exploration by interacting with specific endpoints and trying to figure out exactly where these issues are. Similar from a developer experience perspective, if you're following a design first approach, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, you can really enhance the process by, again, thinking about your developer, thinking about the consumer of the API, and running quick tests early on and asking yourself, hey, is this data formulated correctly? Is it defined okay in the specification? And you can validate and ask all these questions during your API exploration process, and really build APIs that are truly powerful for your developers. And then again, making them easy to consume will drive adoption up really quickly. Another metric that we ask is, what about testing? Do you guys have a formal testing process? And about 56% of users say no, and then 23 and 12, are trying to get there. But the essence here is that one of the biggest things is ensuring that there's quality in the API, so that adoption is really well off, and that your APIs are being consumed correctly. If there's no quality, right, it's hard to use. You will have a decline in usage of the APIs, and we definitely want to see that the other way. And this applies both to internal APIs, right, microservices, if you will, if that's the direction that you're going, and external APIs in terms of customer-facing APIs. And when I say customer-facing APIs, that may mean also customer-facing APIs through applications. So we want to make sure that they are of high quality, and that you have a really good testing process in terms so that, again, your APIs are adopted accordingly when they hit from your public. And then lastly, what is a risk of a poor quality API? And we definitely got a lot of different answers here, but the most is loss of time, resources, right? So again, if you're building microservices and the APIs are of poor quality, that will have downstream effects. And we definitely don't want to do that, because again, that's a consumption of resources. You're feeding other applications or other services that truly depend on APIs, and it, way too much time is spent on trying to figure out what is causing the issues. Exploration can definitely help here again because microservices interact with each other, and if you're running extensive tests or end-to-end tests, it can become very difficult to identify what that core issue is. And exploration can help you dissect each part of those services and really understand what results you're getting back. So a closer look at how can testers help? Well, there's definitely a lot of different ways that they can help, but these are some definitely things to take a look at. So shifting left has become very, very prominent in the industry, and this basically means not just stop testing towards the end, but testing at every part of the API lifecycle. And this is something that QA engineers can definitely help with, right? A good example, I'll come up and talk a little bit more about it a little bit later, but is in that design phase. If you're following a design first approach, you have access to the specification really early on, right? So the OAS, or the defined version of the API. So this means that you can build mockups and start, formulating your test, exploring those endpoints off of the mocks and trying to make sense of, hey, is this defined correctly? And is this data something that's easy to consume from a developer perspective? Again, as we saw in the data, APIs need to be adopted at a higher rate to determine success. So this is a huge opportunity for exploration to take place. And again, ensuring that you're delivering the right type of API to be consumed. Developer experience is top of mind. APIs are built so that developers can consume them, and make their lives easier. So making sure that you're driving quality in these APIs is truly, really important so developers can go on with their day. And then test coverage becomes important as APIs grow and scale. You want to make sure that as much of the API is being tested as possible, and that could be done via a combination of exploration and OAS comparisons. And finally, automation test failures may be very difficult to debug. So for example, if you run your test as part of CI/CD process and there's a failure, you need to go into logs, and you need to redissect what the tests were doing and really drive into the specific endpoints that are causing issues. And an easy way to determine that and to determine the actual root cause of the issue is by using exploration as part of this process. All right, so some of the challenges that Explorer provides from a consumer perspective, right? So again, we've been talking about adoption and driving adoption to your APIs. Again, everything's a lot of the times that you determine success is by ensuring that your APIs are being consumed. And driving this via Explorer will help users or consumers evaluate APIs really, really quickly and determine whether it's a good fit or not to move on. Get the confidence they need, make sure that the API feels secure and is optimal for consumption into their applications. And then it also helps with operations, right? If you're monitoring your applications and the root cause of failure would be an API, you could really use exploration to get through the root cause much quicker, understand and go through the fixes that you need to do. Is it, for example, an AWS outage, or is it an internal issue with deployment that happened really recently? It may not even be the API, but you need to determine that really quickly, and that can be done via exploration. And then from a provider perspective, from folks that produce APIs, can serve as a design aid, right? If you follow a design first approach and you're building your definition off of the requirements that the stakeholders came up with, then you can start building mockups and exploring those mockups again to ask yourself, hey, is this data easy to consume, right? We want to make sure that you're building APIs with the developer in mind. Productizing the APIs and ensuring that documentation is fully loaded and has the data needed so somebody to easily start consuming the APIs is also really important. So from a technical writer perspective, exploration can help you really put meat into your documentation. All All right, so just going through a really quick run through of what a workflow would look like following the design first approach. Again, this is not the end all be all. This is just an example so you guys can start formulating thoughts of how exploration can help. Right, and following some of the SmartBear products and inside of the API software development lifecycle, we start with SwaggerHub. Again, we have some requirements that say, hey, go build an API that does X, Y, Z. You start designing the API using OAS inside of SwaggerHub, and there's a feedback loop um, that where SwaggerHub Explore can really help drive that iteration and make sure that you're building the right thing for your developers to consume. You can also use SwaggerHub as part of the packed flow process, where you're building SDKs to determine to build contracts to make sure that you're not putting any breaking changes into the APIs that your consumers will have issues with down the line. And from a QA and more advanced perspective, you could also use Ready API and build extensive tests that are being run through CI/CD process. And again, use SwaggerHub Explore as a core tool to dissect specific broader issues that happen. And then from a consumer perspective, if you embed documentations and use Explore to really understand and reuse those examples that are being given within documentation, that will definitely help the whole adoption process. Before we drop into the demo, I'd like to ask are there any questions or anything that stood out from the presentation before you see this in action? All right, sounds like that's a no for now. I don't see anything coming in. If not, questions come in, I'll answer them as they go. For now, let's go ahead and jump into the really fun part. So Alex, I'll turn over to you for the demonstration.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jamil. All right, let's take a look at our tool, SwaggerHub Explore. Now, this is obviously a tool that can be used in a lot of different ways. I'm sure you'll see that as we go through some of the functionality. You'll probably imagine different scenarios you can leverage our tool in. We're going to focus mostly on the testing side, of course, right? This is our persona series. We're talking about testing for now. So here's Explore. Right, this is our exploratory and discovery tool for playing around with APIs, right? Doing some basic testing, understanding how your APIs work, manipulating your calls so you can see how it affects the results. Lots of cool things we can do with this, but let's go through some of the functionality. Well, of course, the first thing is, right, we can actually talk to APIs. So let me pull one of my operations in right now. I'm going to play around with the Swagger pet store. Right, we're talking about Swagger here. It's always nice to talk about our pet store. I have an operation that I just pulled from a file I have elsewhere. We're going to talk to the Swagger pet store server. This is publicly hosted. We're just going to talk to an API that exists on the internet. We'll do cloud execution for now. And I have my path already set. So we are calling the pet find by status endpoint, and I have one query parameter of status. Let's start with sold, right? So I've got all the information I need here. I can send the request, and 404 not found. Interesting. Looks like I may have an error in here. Status, let's try available. All right, looks like I may be running into some issues here. Let me just quickly grab the API endpoint again. I'm missing the V2, apologies. /pet/find by status, question mark, or is it? Let's do that, and then we'll add a query parameter like so. Apologies, folks. Yeah, so we add a new query parameter, status available. There we go. All right. So, the cool thing about Explore, right, is, at first I had the wrong API operation, or I had the wrong endpoint, and I was easily able to understand that I was already in the wrong. But with some simple changes to my query parameters, adding a little bit more to my path, we're now successfully playing around with the API, and we can start to move things around. So here you can see I get a response from the server. I can read through it visually, understand what's going on. Of course, right, I can change around some of the parameters to get different results back from the live service. So right, here's a little bit of a playground I can use to interact with the API. I can also do some basic, manual testing here. Right, I can walk through some different scenarios. If I know what to expect from the API, I can get a quick, satisfaction as to whether or not my expectations match what the API does. Right now, of course, I could take this information, build up my real test cases, start to automate and implement those in my dev lifecycle. But here, right, I can get a basic understanding into how our APIs will work. So, after this, right, once we've played around a bit, one of the advantages of working with SwaggerHub Explorer is this information is actually stored for reuse. So on the history page here, I have all these old interactions that I've executed over time. Now on this page, right, we're just going to see some basic information like the endpoint, the channel, what the operation was, but we do have the ability to actually pull this information back into Explorer. So all the way on the right, I'm going to take this operation here, hit open details. We can see what was executed and what was returned from our API in these details here. And if I want to play around with it more, I can actually click the button right here in the top right to bring this back into my current Explorer environment. Right, so now I can get back in here, start playing around again, continue where I left off previously without having all this context that I need to remember or save elsewhere. On top of that, we do also have the concept of spaces. So as you are developing and or as you're playing around with your APIs, there may be some operations or endpoints that you want to save for reuse over time. Right, I'm not done testing this. I want to come back later. I can associate all these operations together into a single space and have this for reuse later. Eventually, there will be some functionality around collaboration here, but for now, this gives us a great tool to save our work to come back later to work on. So let's talk about a few other things that we can do with Explore. So the first one, or one thing that I want to show you is the ability to look at the raw data. So as we're playing with an API, we'll see a nice rendering of whatever JSON or whatever data type we were getting back from the API. We can see all that right here. We can take a look at the headers responded as well. But sometimes we're debugging. Right? Maybe I'm a tester that's actively trying to understand why an API is not working properly. We do have the ability to go to raw mode. So if we want to see exactly what was sent to the API and exactly what was replied by the API, I have the raw mode available for me to do so. Right now, I can see, I can really dive into the JSON. It's not prettified or anything. I can really start to understand, why something might be breaking. So having the ability to go in and view the raw information of what's being responded by our API, super powerful when it comes to testing and debugging our services.
This is a perfect example of how developers in QA can definitely collaborate in understanding when something's not working correctly. Again, when you're running through automation tests, right, we have to dive direct, into logs and then debug things and then understand endpoints and Explore really makes that debugging and understanding of endpoints really quick and easy. And it's easy to copy and paste request and response and what actually went through the wire, right? And try to, help the developer understand where the issues are so that you could get a quicker fix.
That's exactly right. I remember my first job was as a software developer, and I would mostly do bug fixes. And I remember, I'd make my fix, and we didn't have a good exploratory tool at the time, so I'd have to re-kick off my test suite, right? Well, that's a CI process that's running in the background, and that's going to take tile to compile everything. And I'm just kind of sitting there, right? With a tool like this, we can just make that call directly from our browser, get an instant response back, and start understanding what may have gone wrong. So yeah, great tool for QA testers to understand what may be happening and interact with the APIs that much faster. So next thing, let's take a quick look at is our local execution. So, it's very common during API development that things aren't deployed yet, right? Maybe we're not at that stage of development. So all we have is our developers developing on their machines where they can spin up the APIs locally to play around with. Well, maybe, Tamil is my dev and I'm his tester. He submitted a GitHub pull request and I want to start playing around with it. But, our DevOps team hasn't gotten involved in this project yet. There's nothing deployed, not even in staging. So I can actually download and deploy that API locally, which is what I've done here. I now have a locally running version of my Swagger pet store. And I can talk to this guy now. So let's go back to Explore. Let me pull my URL up quickly. This guy here. So now you can see I have a local host here, and we're going to call the same operation. So we're going to call it pet bind by status, and I will add my query parameter one more time of status equals available. So now, hopefully, when I send this request, oh no, I've gotten an error. That's because I haven't done everything I need to do yet. The first thing you'll need to do is you'll actually need to change where you are connecting to. So you can see right now I am connected to cloud or publicly hosted APIs. I'm going to go down to local. But as you can see, status is still unavailable. You will need to run an agent on your machine to execute against locally deployed APIs. Now, the download is available right here. I actually already have it downloaded to my machine, SwaggerHub execution agent. So let's boot up this guy quickly. Let me try that again. All right. Oh, open too many windows. All right, we'll give that a moment to spin up. But now with my agent, I will be able to talk to my locally deployed APIs, right? So even APIs that haven't found a space on our cloud yet, right? We can still talk to them and interact with them.
So
let's
really quickly, there was a question up here. I'll just answer it live. So they're asking, is SwaggerHub Explore available on-prem? The answer to that is no. But if the need is interacting with local APIs, the way that you do it is, as Alex has shown right now, via agents, and should make your life a lot easier for maintaining something on premise. I hope that answers your question.
All right, looks like I'm having a couple of issues with my agent. Let me restart it.
I don't think it's your agent. Just remove the HTTPS and HTTPS.
Oh, that happened last time as well. Yeah, okay, that's right. I can't. Awesome, thank you, Tamil. Yeah, I'd forgotten that. Yeah, we're just working with non-HTTPS. All right, so I'm able to talk to my local service, right? So if my developer built this out, they want to get an understanding as to whether or not they're in line with the business requirements for the project they're working on, we can start playing around with it instantly, right? We don't need to wait for the DevOps team to deploy it to a cloud. We don't need to throw it in a staging environment. We can start, playing around with this as soon as the pull request has been submitted. So besides that, we do also have the ability to interact with Kafka services. So I am going to kill this one for now. I do not have a publicly hosted Kafka example to work with, but I do have this one here that I can deploy locally. So let's deploy our Kafka service. Let's see this, get it up and running, and then we'll start playing around with this one from Explore as well. So let me close that out. So the other protocol that is currently supported by SwaggerHub Explore is Kafka, and with it, there we go, that's fine. We can both publish and subscribe to one of our brokers. So I've got the Kafka service running locally. Let's now talk to it. So let me plug in my server and my channel. So my server is, of course, localhost. My channel is something that is called Zookeeper. And let's put a message in the body. So I'm just going to put in a message that says hello. There we go. I'm going to put in a little bit more message because I think I've already sent this a few times to this broker. Today is June 28th. All right. So I'm now just going to fire this off to my broker, and hopefully we should get a message that says Kafka message sent. Awesome. Right. Again, this isn't something that's publicly hosted. I am still connected to my local machine. All right. Well, let's pull the messages down now. Right. There are already a few messages in there. I've just added another one. So when I subscribe to this broker, we should hopefully see a couple of messages. Oh, I only have one. So it must have gotten cleaned up. Right. But you can see, right. Hello. Today is, oh, why does it say just? I meant to write June. Today is June 28th. Right. So with Explore, same thing as our REST APIs. If I have developers that are working on Kafka services that maybe don't live in a live environment yet, where we can play against them from any client, we can use SwaggerHub Explore to deploy these services locally and then play around with them. So, hopefully we demonstrated today a couple cool capabilities of SwaggerHub Explore that can help you, not only test your APIs, right? That's what we're focusing today's session on, but there's a lot of other use cases as well, right? As we're designing our APIs, we can start to play around with local deployments. If we're learning how to use others' APIs, like let's say Tamil built one, he's at another company, I need to interface with it. I can use SwaggerHub Explore to easily learn and interact with and understand how that API works, right? Really start to play around with the surface area and understanding what this API offers.
It's a very good point, Alex. Thank you very much for that. I will say there's a lot of questions around, Postman and SOAP UI and Ready API and how is this different? Those tools have very powerful features that allow you to do a lot, right? Go from building tests to building documentation to building end-to-end CI/CD and even potentially more performance tests and monitoring, right? So those tools are really full of capabilities that allow you to really understand and make sure that your API is full, it's working correctly. Explore is meant to reduce friction for those folks that are trying to understand an API. Right? You don't want to go into a testing tool and try to download or figure out all the functionality when all you really want to do is get to the meat and interact with a single API. This power will definitely, be exponential when the next iteration of Explore will come out, where we'll have a direct integration with SwaggerHub, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But I definitely wanted to address. It seems like there's a lot of questions about, hey, how is this different from Postman or SOAP UI or other clients? Again, we're hyper focused on that initial interaction. And if you guys saw as well, we're trying to be multi-protocol. So the difference between sending a REST request and sending a Kafka publish message or subscribing to a topic using Kafka within Explore is almost identical to the process of sending a get method or a post method within Explore on the REST side. So again, I hope you guys got something out of that. More than happy to talk a little bit more about your current processes or how this would fit into your world. One thing to take into consideration: Explore is a free tool. Definitely go in there. You create your username and password, and you could use it. And again, the power will definitely be exponential in our next iteration. I'll kind of jump into that right now. Let's see. So going back into my slides. So we just went through the demo. Again, if any questions arise, please let me know. So what are we working on as we speak? So for mid-July, we will have a direct integration with SwaggerHub. So for those of you that are driving API adoption using SwaggerHub and building documentation or following a design-first approach, when you're interacting with those APIs or when those APIs are within SwaggerHub, you will be able to launch Explore and very easily just stay in the context of that same method or API interaction that you are in SwaggerHub and start playing around the different parameters inside of Explore. So that's going to be a one-to-one integration. And to go further on that, the integration is actually threefold, right? The first flow is you go from a SwaggerHub to Explore. The second flow is that you could actually look at all the APIs that exist within your SwaggerHub account and choose which ones you want to start working with and interact with them and go from there. You will also be, let's say you have no API documentation, you're starting from scratch and you're interacting with endpoint, you could actually generate an OES file and push to SwaggerHub so that you can document that API and not have to start from scratch. So we'll generate a boilerplate OES file to you based off of the APIs that you have explored, and then you can go on and adding the nitty gritty information about what data types it supports and things like that to again just you don't have to start from scratch when building documentation for your APIs.
Yeah, Tamil, I just want to jump in quickly. Jimmy actually had a question about this. Can this app help you generate documentation? This is exactly what Tamil was just talking about. So, with Open API, great way to document your services, but a lot of times when our APIs are already built, it's hard to get to that point where we have documentation. When you make a couple of API executions within Explore, you can aggregate those together, create your Open API document, and fire it straight off to SwaggerHub. This is something that I've been very excited about for a while, and I think it'll tell a super powerful story for discoverability and recording what you discover from your APIs. But I just wanted to address that. This answers Jimmy's question in the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alex. All right. After July and August, we're going to build more functionality around collaboration so that folks aren't just working in silos. Again, this product was just delivered in February. We're getting a quick uptake. Collaboration is top of mind for everybody, and ensuring that they're sharing work and it doesn't just live in their account is really important. So we'll also be talking about that. And then beyond August, we will be working on more testing functionality and really trying to connect things to other tools to make sure that, again, Explore doesn't get bloated with a lot of functionality and it serves a very good purpose of interacting with APIs and maybe simple testing. And then, if you need to document or design or, those are set out into other products. So that's it for now. I'm going to dedicate the last couple of minutes to the questions that I see because there are a lot that are coming in. But before we do jump into that, this will be shared. But if you want more, if you want to try Explore, it's available for free. Definitely go in there. There's documentation to get started. All you need to do is provide your generate a username and password. All right, so let's go through the questions that I see out here. Let's see. So, what is the collaboration process methodology plan? So that's a bloated question. It's going to, and just to answer at a very high level, one is going to be sharing, easily, like you share collections, very similar to that, and then another is going to be, hey, let's work together inside of this product to build exploration tools and documentation and some of the other parts of the API lifecycle together. So that's all I can say for now. I hope that answers your question. Let's see, how can I access a recording for the previous 2 webinars in the series? Somehow I missed the announcement for them. So that we can make sure that you have them. Can somebody, we'll make sure that we take note of that and follow up. Let's see. Will you share? Yeah, so the recording of the demo will go out. It will be available on demand after that. There's also questions in the main chat. We'll switch to that in a little bit as well. Let's see. How many requests are saved in history? That's a good question. So in history, there are 1,000 requests that should be saved. After 1,000 requests, your oldest requests will be replaced with the newest ones. So they will get pushed down. The oldest will get deleted, and then the new ones will stick on top. I hope that answers your question. And again, the good thing about the history is that definitely saves metadata and data and allows you to rerun those requests as you saw on the demo. And then for many requests saved on history and for how much time. Right now it's indefinite, but that is definitely subject to change. So keep an eye out for that. Will you be using Git for multiple user collaboration for tools? right now that's still a question that we have to ourselves. Again, we're definitely taking in feedback. When you go into the product of Explorer, there will be a button that allows you to provide feedback if there is a need that you have for exploration purposes and feel like Git is part of that process. Please provide that as feedback inside of the product, and we'll definitely take it into consideration. All right, I'm going to switch to the chat now just to make sure that we cover as many questions as we can. Again, if we don't cover some questions, we will follow up with you guys. Let's see.
So I can take one of these questions, Tamil. I see Steve's question on integrating with third-party APIs and any suggestions around that. Explore would be a great tool to kind of help you start playing around, right? This third party may provide you documentation, so it can kind of tell you how the information is organized, but it's not going to give you a complete image into exactly what the API does, right? There's context that's going to be associated with every response you get from the server, which the documentation may not cover that well. So being able to explore and say, okay, if I have this parameter set to 1, what do I get back? Now, if I set it to 2, what do I get back? That is really invaluable when it comes to learning how the APIs work and playing around with them. So Explore would be a great tool as you're building your client, as you're building your interface to say, okay, now I have a perfect understanding into what I'm going to get back from the API when I have a request that looks like this. So definitely invaluable during the integration phase when working with third-party APIs. So great question, Steve. Tamil, did you already take a look at Ready API versus Explore? Did you want to dive into that a bit? I know you've worked with both products.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about it already. Again, Ready API provides a lot of functionality for being able to build extensive tests. It has layers for you to organize test cases and test suites. It has things like data-driven capabilities so to act or to push your tests into CI/CD and automation frameworks very easily. But it's a fully functional API testing tool. It doesn't get better than that. However, it is a desktop application. It requires a license, and Explore is free, right? And it allows you to get that entry point, interacting with APIs, understanding if things work correctly or not, and moving on to the next part of your process, right? So those are the differences, right? Ready API is a beast of a product that allows you to do more than any other API testing tool in the industry. And API and Explore provides that entry level to, just quick in and out. Understands if failures are happening, where are they? Let me debug really quickly. There's Explore. Or maybe I'm trying to understand this API, interact with Explore really quickly, and then move on to your other process. One thing I will say, I do see an integration somewhere in 2024 with these two products.
Yeah, I just want to say on top of that, and you already did a great job of picturing it, but the big thing for me, but like the difference between the two is the barrier to entry, right? Ready API is going to take a lot more to get up and running. Like Tamil was saying, it's a desktop application. You're going to have to build out your test cases. Explore, I go to the website, I sign in with my SmartBear account, I start talking to APIs, right? So if we're just looking for quick validations, I want to understand how the API works, Explore will be a lot more useful for that. Ready API, of course, so much more you can do. Automation, virtualization, performance testing, lot more you can do there. But the barrier to entry is a big factor in choosing one for me.
Yeah, very good, Alex. Hey, I want to thank everybody. This was a great session. I love when things go interactive because that means that there's interest and we have a really, really good conversation. So keep that going. If there are further things or things that we missed, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We will follow up with this information, and we're more than happy to have broader conversations about things. Again, thank you so much for joining. I feel like this was a great session. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day, folks.